And Neil, I will start with you. Of course, you represent a network of UK companies which traditionally have a very global exposure. I mean, they're participating in projects all over the world. And in that regard, how would you benchmark Rail Baltica compared to these other projects in terms of its openness to and accessibility for international suppliers? And if you could, also what could be improved in your view?
Thank you, Kaspers. Yes, you're right. I'm from the UK Railway Industry Association. We have 270 members who are local suppliers, SMEs, and international companies. I think, first of all, I just want to say that Rail Baltica can make a real global economic difference to the countries involved. Rail has huge potential. In the UK, rail is an important sector, as I'm sure it is in the other European countries that are here. We contribute 36 billion in GVA annually in the UK, and the rail sector brings in 11 billion in tax for the government. Its ability to improve the life of passengers and for the country, as well as the sector, shouldn't be undervalued. The UK's experience of rail privatisation, market liberalisation, along with significant investment in rail infrastructure, has given the companies that work in the UK a whole range of experiences in this liberalised market. And we've shared that experience around the world, and we continue to do so. RIA has had the honour of facilitating many visits to the UK of international and rail organisations and governments, including Rail Baltica. We're very pleased that Rail Baltica came to the UK to learn our lessons so we could share our best practice and also explain where things didn't quite go so well. And I'm sure, and I know that Rail Baltica also visited many other European countries to learn those same lessons. We are very pleased that we see so many companies from Europe winning these tenders. And I think one of the things that Rail Baltica has done well is to promote Rail Baltica. Rail is undergoing a huge growth spurt around the world as governments and transit authorities release the power of rail to move goods quickly and efficiently in a sustainable manner. It's pleasing that you have engaged early with the industry because there is a lot of projects going on around the world, and our members need to be aligned to those so they have resources and manpower in place to react to the tenders. The Rail Baltica website is something you should be very proud of. The fact that it's transparent, it's in English helps our companies, but also obviously it's in local language. And we would hope that you would keep this website going. And also, I think from the company's point of view, looking ahead, we would like to see pre-tender at least further discussions with the industry on innovation, perhaps technology and market-led proposals. Our companies want to engage with you ahead of the tenders so they can share the best practice, they can explain about the innovation that you may or may not be aware of, and that they can engage with your teams. You mentioned, or it was mentioned this morning, about whole life cycle costs. That is really important, and to have output specifications, again, is very important. And it's important, obviously, that you get your costings correct, but if whole life cycle can be incorporated in those specifications from an industry point of view, I think that's very important as well. The major contracts that you will be undertaking in the next few years, as they are awarded, it would be very good if Rail Baltica could engage with the contract winners, with the OEMs, etc., and then do some sort of interaction with the suppliers, so the suppliers and the major contract winners can work together to encourage the procurement of equipment and services from SMEs and companies alike. One thing that hasn't been mentioned really so far is legacy and skills. And it's a very important part of any major new infrastructure project, I feel. The UK, for example, with Crossrail, has awarded contracts to around 56% of SMEs, and they have created and trained over 1,000 apprenticeships. So as a question moving on, what's RB Rail's view on the legacy and skills? Because you're in a unique position to help your local sector, and to our companies can invest in helping them, working locally with them, and sharing our best practices.
Thank you, Neil. Yeah, and let's address also this issue during the discussion. The skills issue is definitely something we should spend some time on, also communicating here within the family. Ben, of course, everyone knows the big German giants, the Siemenses and the Deutsche Bahns of this world, but arguably the backbone of the German economic engine is the Mittelstand. And in this regard, as many of these small, medium-sized companies are part of your association, together with the big giants, so what do you think also, maybe following on what Neil was saying, with regard to the possibilities of involving small and medium-sized companies in a project like Rail Baltica, where presumably the big guys have an easier way in? But how do we promote both locally and internationally, and also from a German perspective, the involvement of SMEs?
Yeah, thanks for that. Actually, I think we are on our way to do so, because we have already managed to establish, if you like, a platform where Rail Baltica and SMEs can meet. Like Rail Baltica visited and addressed our infrastructure committee, the Railway Associations Committee, and we disseminate information and so forth. And this is, I think, exactly the way how to move forward, to really be in contact and then to promote things also on a more detailed level. So this, to our mind, is extremely important. As you said, probably the heartbeat of German railway industry is the cluster between the well-known international brands you alluded to, and the probably proverbial Deutscher Mittelstand, SMEs. Many companies, more than 200 in the VDB, specializing on certain technological niches and being really world champions in these niches. So in order to bring this together and to create additional value for Rail Baltica, to my mind, it's extremely important to continue this communication strand we are already on. And I think this is, as you already underlined, something really attractive about Rail Baltica, and special about Rail Baltica, because Rail Baltica seems to be inclined to communicate with industry at a very early stage, and this is something we particularly appreciate. Also, if I try to cut a long story short when it comes to the German perception of Rail Baltica, I think the more condensed version would be, people are fascinated by the ambition Rail Baltica reflects. It's not just one rail project, it's a very ambitious, one could even say audacious rail project. And I think this is exactly how rail works in Europe. Because in Berlin as well as in Brussels, there are many politicians contemplating about the questions, how would we actually manage to convince people to switch over to rail, or to bring logistics on rail for climate protection reasons? And the answer, to our mind, certainly is not having moralizing stump speeches saying people, well, you need to, don't you understand us, it's necessary for the good of the world, basically. But the answer is, to our mind, rail needs to deliver. The solutions must be fascinating for citizens and customers. And this seems to be, to our mind at least, really the heart of Rail Baltica, to make rail better and to convince people and to fascinate people, and also to create, as we heard earlier today, stations which are fascinating for people. And this is also something we very, very much appreciate in Germany, and therefore we'll be happy to contribute to this project as much as possibly we can.
Thank you. I think the very encouraging remarks are much appreciated in the community. Clearly, I think the Rail Baltica team, both the joint venture and then the national institutions, are really driven by this sense of purpose and audacious inspiration, understanding and realizing the magnitude of this project, again, for the Baltic societies and for Europe as a whole. Pedro, Spain is, of course, Spain has the longest high-speed network in Europe, number 2 in the world. It is relatively recent, so it was also a spectacular achievement in Spain to deliver this high-speed railway network, and something that we feel also in the Rail Baltica project with the very active involvement of the Spanish companies, is that, of course, as part of delivering your national network, you seem to have incubated and developed a world-class rail supply and consultancy industry. So could you maybe describe how that process happened, and maybe if there are some lessons to be learned also for the Baltic states, and how do you breed a future export-oriented know-how-based industry by developing a mega project here in the region?
Well, hello everyone, and thank you Rail Baltica for inviting me on behalf of MAFEX to be present here today. Well, asking your question, I would say that after the implementation of the first high-speed line in Spain 25 years ago, we as a country had to face a tough decision. Should we implement the following high-speed lines under a turnkey project basis, or should we split the projects into smaller sections and packages? In order to facilitate the participation of a larger number of companies. So we chose the second option. There was, well, I'm aware that you might be that this was a risky decision, and it is not black or white, but it was about of responsibility in order to have a lot of coordination and monitoring of the projects. But also it brought big benefits for our industry. So first, we could facilitate the access to the projects to small and medium-sized companies and Spanish companies. So we boosted our own economy and created this rail supply chain more actively. So it was a country industry policy supporting the rail industry. Second, if something failed, I don't know, change management, commitment to the requirements of the final client, the risk after that could affect the whole planning of the project were minimized, comparing to a turnkey project. And so that was also a benefit. Again, a lot of coordination and monitoring was required. And then third and most important, by doing this way, we allowed local companies and local domestic entities to be more competitive, to increase their competitiveness. And so they all worked for the best practices, the best products, and the best solutions. And well, you know what happens when there are dozens of companies, you know, fighting for a project. They get incredibly good at it, and they get very competitive. So they innovate. And well, I won't extend about innovation because I guess some panelists are speaking more and better about innovation, but I must insist from our side, from the Spanish rail industry side, that initiatives like Safety Rail, for example, should be or must be supported by European community, for example. So it's not only about supporting innovation, but also about helping innovation to be on the market. So the same thing happens when we invest in a country in infrastructures. It is good to invest, but it is good to make our companies part of this investment from the Spanish perspective, according to our experience. And so now, as you mentioned, we have the second largest high-speed network in the world, and many Spanish companies participated in these achievements. We have a very competitive rail supply chain that covers all different fields of activity in the rail sector. And these achievements probably began some more years ago before the first construction of the first Spanish high-speed line, but the first line was, and after the first line was a huge rise of our industry. So we have small companies, we have large companies, we have national companies, we have multinational companies with excellence centers based in Spain, and so I think that comes from those decisions we made at that time, almost 30 years ago.
Thank you, Pedro. Indeed, it's an inspiring story, and then hopefully, in the Baltic states, we can also realize these benefits following the delivery of mega infrastructure or mega projects, and then to see that industry acquiring also some kind of global footprint and continuously delivering additional value to the Spanish economy in this case and beyond. So thanks. Look, of course, well, the French railway industry also, and the French infrastructure construction industry also has a global footprint. And then maybe I could then ask you to compare Rail Baltica to other European and global mega projects, also in light of the fact that, of course, we know that big French infrastructure construction companies are oftentimes involved in design, build, operate, finance, turnkey projects. So in Rail Baltica, of course, as a reflection on how this project is organized, is financed, we piece into smaller pieces, both the designs and subsequently also delivery of subsystems construction. How does that compare to other projects, and does that encourage or discourage the involvement of French companies?
Yeah, first of all, yes, we are highly interested with Rail Baltica, and I will repeat more or less what Ben have said about Rail Baltica. Fantastic project, multi-state project. This is a very ambitious one. At the same time, technically speaking, it's a project which is clearly in the frame of technical issues of coming from the EU, TSIs, the European norms. So we have a clear frame to design this project. I think this is and for the FIF we have more or less 300 members, including big companies, and I'm not going to name them because some of the others will be jealous. But anyway, we have big companies, we have engineering companies, we have track work companies, and we have a majority of small and medium enterprises, majority of SMEs which are regrouped in 5 clusters. So we are interested, and the technical frame is clear. This is the first point. So we don't see any particular difficulty on the technical field. But this is one project. We have heard that this morning several times. Good. One project, one design. I just said that. Please, no national rules. The ERA is fighting against national rules, which was so many, more than 10,000, and now reducing. Let us not create national rules and work toward an international and European point of view immediately. After that, for operation, the key of the success of the project is obviously a design construct, but after that, the operation. At the same time, EU is developing a system to manage air traffic. Carlo knows perfectly, César, for the whole traffic all across Europe. And we could think that the railways, competing against air, should manage the traffic on a single line with several control centers. I think we have to find the magic formula to make the traffic managed at one place and to leave some specific rule for the nation, the states, because there will be some regional traffic. The formula must be founded as we have the ERA and the national safety authorities for safety, but we should not think systematically to 3 different control centers. Just that, for instance, there will be a question of language. This is well known in the international project, and maybe English could be the good one because it's neutral. And as soon as our colleague from the UK will leave the EU, everybody will be equal. Because today it's a little bit unfair, I have to say. When the British take the floor, their English is better than mine, at least. So that was a joke. Sorry. And then one word about the procurement. It was very interesting to listen to what we have heard this morning. And in my mind, procurement is not a technical issue, is not a financial issue. This is, I would say, a strategic, a political, and a management issue, with at least 2 or 3 issues. You have said that you are not going to work towards cheaper, okay? It's also a question of the meat, most economically advantageous tender. The UNIFE, probably Phillipe will speak about that. There is now a common position from the industry suppliers. Good, very good. After that, the problem is which is the choice in terms of volume, of thickness of the slices. We discussed about slices, or the size of the blocks. And my feeling, I used to work for SNCF for more than 30 years. My conviction is that 2 small pieces are a source of difficulties, not only because finance, you have to discuss so many contracts that it is a little bit difficult, but also it's not providing the, calling for the good responsibility from the suppliers. And if you say, we define partly design and construct, why not to think that to propose, construct and maintain? Because as soon as you link the 2 issues, the company which will take the construction, it will have to think to the maintenance for some years, and it will give to it a wider responsibility with the quality of the construction. It's the same for rolling stock. The incumbent railways are not externalizing this subject. I think they will come one day or the other. So question of procurement is a main issue, and I repeat, a main issue for management of the project in the long term, because this is the issue for everybody, not immediate delivering, but with some vision in long term.
Thank you, Luc. Of course, you touched many critical subjects, and especially on the subject on how perhaps Rail Baltica could be a possibility to deliver these European solutions instead of maybe focusing on reinventing locally based national solutions. Language is, of course, clearly an important element here, and I think many of us have in mind the possibility that maybe the future operational language for Rail Baltica could be a single language. And this is something that we could certainly aspire to, also closely following the process where, of course, ERA is involved, the UIC, on whether there emerges one common language, like is usually the case in aviation and maritime industry, and which works so well. Mats, of course, here in the Baltic states, we are supporters of the economic integration of the Baltic Sea region, bringing together Baltic countries with the Nordic countries, somewhat beyond banking and forestry, which are the usual suspects. What is your view? Do you believe that Rail Baltica could be one such platform to integrate the Baltic states more closely with the Nordic construction and infrastructure industry?
First, thanks for having me here. It's been a really friendly expectation being here, and I will definitely promote Rail Baltica for the Swedish companies that I represent. Swerig, which I'm representative of, is a member group of 45 companies, from smaller companies to larger companies, from construction components, engineering, consultancies, and of course, as being part of a project like this, and also looking at the picture shown here today that you have no Swedish contracts today. It's a bit embarrassing sitting here, so I've actually asked around all my Swedish friends here in the room, and I understand that there are some Swedish people working in the project and subcontracting someone else, and there are also a lot of Swedish initiatives to find local partners here. Of course, that's a way to bring together the different parties. And from a Nordic point of view, we're getting closer to Baltic. I believe we, as neighbors, are as close as today, and I think that will continue and go further. I see definitely a position for that.
Thank you. Very encouraging, of course. Swedish Nordic companies, yes, are involved to a certain extent, Nordic professionals, but we are looking forward, of course, also Nordic companies having successfully participating in our tenders. Phillipe, and thank you for your patience. Of course, you may speak more holistically, representing the entire European rail industry. So what in your view, how would you reflect on the Baltic and international experiences in mega project implementation, and also collaboration between project developers, the delivery organizations, and the international rail community, rail supply community?
Thank you, Gaspar. Just wanted to say that UNIFE, we represent the rail supply industry, and we work closely with all the national associations which are represented here. So it's important for you to know. And you have to know that UNIFE has always been very supportive of this greenfield project, which is Rail Baltica, which I would like to highlight will be financed by the EU budget, the EU taxpayer, and that's why the European rail supply industry will be very active, because we want to have a very successful project here in the Baltic states. The second thing that I would like to say is that during these 2 days conference, there's been almost no mention about the future role of the European Railway Agency, which is, there's been just a word on this by Luc. I have to note on the 16th of June of 2019, there will be a big change in Europe, because this European Railway Agency will be the one-stop shop, the authorization vehicle, but they will be as well the system authority for ERTMS. So a lot of things are going to change, and a lot of power will go from the NSAs to this European Railway Agency. So it's very important for, I think, Rail Baltica Rail to know that this new organization will start this year. After that, I just want to say two important things. One is about public procurement, but Luc said a lot of things, and it is true that together with the other associations, CR, EIM, and ourselves, we are preparing guidelines, because the most economic advantageous tenders for the award of contract plus the best price-quality ratio are absolutely essential if you want to have a sustainable project with good criteria. So I was very happy to see that here in the Baltic states you have already prepared common guidelines for public procurement, which goes in that direction. So that is also very important. The other thing that I wanted to say is that for us, as we want to have a very innovative project, one of the most important things will be about shift to rail, and we have Carlo Borghini, so I will not say a lot about this. And yesterday, our colleague, Labour Lockman, when he took the floor, said that shift to rail is absolutely essential, and that we have to fight with the support of the member state to have a shift to rail too, because in terms of innovation, it will be certainly very useful for Rail Baltica Rail to work and to know what is happening for those different topics. And on our side, of course, UNIFE, and we are totally transparent, even with those who are not our members, they will see that in a few days from now we'll publish our ideas about Shift Rail 2 on what we call the key enablers, about digitalization, about those important topics on ETO. So that's what I wanted to say. There is one thing which is absolutely essential, is if you want to have an interoperable system, and it has been mentioned yesterday by Catherine Trotman, the coordinator, and I know that Matthias Rotus was here, is the deployment of ERTMS. If you don't have a deployment of ERTMS, you will not have an interoperable system. That's why it's absolutely essential to start working on this, on the deployment of RTMS for the next future. So on our side, what we want to pass as messages that we are at the disposal of Rail Baltica Rail with our members. We can participate in all kinds of seminars, so we are really open. And for us, this is really a flagship project for Europe, which must be a big success, because we need, especially when you see the competition coming from other economic sectors, to have big successes in the rail sector.
Thank you, Phillipe. And of course, as you know, and also to let our community know, we are cooperating with UNIFE on a number of subjects, including, of course, as we start preparing for a strategy study on the deployment and procurement of ERTMS. It's clearly a subject of critical importance, the digital backbone for our infrastructure, which leads me nicely into the final panelists. Again, Carlo, also thank you for your patience. Shift2Rail is a very important partner in the project. We are now working on what we call Rail Baltica Global Project Innovation Strategy, and Shift2Rail is one of our partners. We are working on producing the work packages and then seeing how we can develop to make sure that innovation and digitalization intertwines, or basically permeates all aspects of Rail Baltica. Again, in a reflection of this unique opportunity as a greenfield project, that we can deliver something that's smart from the beginning. And in this regard, and I hope that during our Q&A discussion, we will also touch on innovation, as Pedro also emphasized. But to start, could you reflect on how Rail Baltica could serve as a platform for Baltic players in collaboration with international partners to get involved in this international collaboration on propelling research and innovation in the field of railways. And of course, as we know, so far you haven't had much success in attracting Baltic applicants to Shift2Rail Horizon 2020 processes.
Thank you, Casper. And it was extremely interesting to be here to listen to different opinions. I will start from the fact that having such an event, you bring together the Shift2Rail community. Many members are present here. I saw we discussed with them in different occasions. Well, many members are sitting here, effectively, also in this platform. So how we see it is that rail research innovation that we are doing in Shift2Rail is a sector approach, as Phillipe said before and Libor mentioned yesterday. So we believe that the results coming from the research innovation we are doing in the program can be really an opportunity for projects of such magnitude like Rail Baltica, where to test the results, not for the test as an end to itself, but as a starting point for the market uptake. Because what we are doing in research innovation is on one side challenging the current way we are operating railways, but on the other side is to ensure that we have new solutions for the market. And I think this is really the first opportunity into which we can bring together the Baltic region entities, research center, community, industries, manufacturer, operators, and international partners and work together on such type of projects. So I believe Shift2Rail can be the platform for this. We need also to consider the fact that you will be procuring solution that will be implemented and operating as from 2026. We believe that by then we will have new innovation that will be ready for early deployment. Clearly, it will be, on one side, we need to be extremely careful because we need to preserve interoperability and the investment that will be done. And the other, we can be more ambitious because we can make choices of different types. So when we talk about interoperability and safety-related aspect, ERTMS is clearly the baseline, and the ERTMS will be the baseline on which we'll introduce the game changer. So when I look at Rail Baltica, I see Rail Baltica as an opportunity to bring these game changers as early as possible, as a platform for working together and to accelerate the market uptake. On the other side, I see a series of research innovation aspects that are independent or not so connected to interoperability and safety, into which we can accelerate all in all, because if I think about robotics and infrastructure, and I think about intelligent management of the assets or other type of solution, this can be tested in different ways, in different parts of the network, of the new network, and bring the results. So working together is a win-win solution because we'll provide feedback on where we are going and how we are able to bring real benefit for new operations, but also, I believe, going in the direction of creating opportunities for a better investment of such a big project in the future.
So, thank you very much, and I think this also conveys a message that of course we want both the Baltic governments, the European Commission, to hear that yes, indeed, Rail Baltica has this unique opportunity, especially given that some technologies are kind of, the old technology is on the way out, the new technology is not there yet. At the same time, of course, we also have pressures when it comes to the project delivery timelines, the funding schedules, and of course, as we adopt a more of a life cycle approach, because innovation, of course, is part and parcel of delivering also a sustainable operational expense in the future, let alone, you know, being in tune with the innovation tendencies. So clearly, this is something we also want our stakeholders to be aware of, that there is this inherent dilemma, whether you go for a quick and easy solution or you invest a little bit more. And for that reason, we are developing an innovations strategy to see how we can benefit over the long term, over the entire life cycle. Maybe at the cost of a little delay and maybe marginal increase in CapEx, which is more than outweigh in the future by lower OpEx and better technological readiness. So thank you for these inputs. I think we are ready now for the Q&A. I would kindly request the Slido questions. Okay, and then feel free to raise a hand if someone wants, especially some question. All right. Right, for innovation, should it be measured in cost or in the scope for savings? Pretty much what we just discussed, but maybe someone wants to further add on that, maybe in light of other projects as well. Carlo?
Yeah, it's an extremely interesting question. I make a simple example because it speaks much more than anything else. In the US, in January, there is a major Transport Research Board event. The Norwegian presented there, I think it's called Project 39, if I'm not mistaken, is the highway on the west side connecting all the fjords. They have 39 bridges and tunnels and galleries. Sorry, they have 39 ferries, and they want to take them away and bring bridges and ferries and a way to bring tunnels and floating tunnels and so on and so on. The initial project was 2 billion euros. They invested in research and innovation, and up to now, they save 200 million euros. So when we discussed this morning, bleeding, the 5.8 billion euros, the 5.8 billion euros is, in my opinion, should be looked at as a ceiling. And whatever we are able to introduce through research and innovation should not bring to additional cost. It should bring to making use, better use of the resources to do something else, and maybe to enhance the project to a certain extent. And I think this is the lesson that we have from the Norwegian, in which we are able to reduce their cost from 2 billion euros already to 1.8 and so on, is a way that we need to look into it. So research and innovation should be really measured against the capability to introduce saving, because we are making, rethinking the way we are developing a project. We are not only simply, if you are looking digitalization, we are not simply translating in digital solution the current processes. We need to rethink the processes. I think this is really the great opportunity offered now by innovation. And what we do in Shift to Rail, fundamentally, in terms of innovation, railway innovation, is based on two key enablers that are, on one side, digitalization, and the other side is automation. And it was said before by Neil, I think, at the beginning, of saying, don't forget the staff. And when we are talking about staff, we are talking about skill and competencies, and through digitalization and automation, we need to have the staff on board to accompany the process. And these changes will not concern the current staff, will concern the next generation. So we need to be sure that we'll be able to leverage this knowledge that in some country will disappear soon, in a manner that research and innovation will build upon this extremely good knowledge.
Thanks. Ben, can I ask you, yesterday, well, we noted that Deutsche Bahn has a 10 billion budget for investment budget for 2019, of which 10% is for digitalization. So in light of that question, what is the German approach to this, and especially this dilemma between cost and long-term OPEX savings?
First of all, I think that when it comes to procurement, the Rail Baltic project is, to our mind, really cutting edge in many respects. And it's also, to some degree, a reference for some other projects, I think, in the European Union, because the basic line seems to be that by realizing, implementing innovations with a life cycle approach, it's possible to cut costs as well as to create and generate more traffic and make an economic case with that as well by doing so. And you have several elements which are really top of the line, namely ETCS, namely building information modeling, namely the meet criteria Luke alluded to. And I think this all comes up to a very sophisticated and innovation-friendly procurement scheme. So we believe there is not necessarily a contradiction between these elements. It all sums up to a more economic and also ecologically sound system. And another thing we like to point out is some always say, well, if you all do this digitized stuff, it's fine and it's sound and so forth, but it's extremely expensive, isn't it? And of course, ETCS rolling out is expensive, no doubt on that. And I was happy to learn that you're dealing with level 2 and baseline 3, which is certainly the essential level and standard we need to have in Europe. And of course, it's also not exactly cheap to then implement the systems on the rolling system, namely the onboard units. That's true. But there's already evidence. It's not a, if you like, scholastic, futuristic idea. It's already evidence that ETCS pays off. It just works. And if I may address the Spanish example as well as the German one, we have now high-speed connections between the cities of Barcelona and Madrid, and we have high-speed connections between the cities of Berlin and Munich. And both of them are based on ETCS and facilitated by ETCS. And the market share actually skyrocketed. I think between Madrid and Barcelona it was about 11%, now it's more than 50%. The same happened in Germany, so it works. So we need to invest to make that happen. And I think we have a really fully fledged framework of references that it actually does work.
Staying on this very important issue, where many other issues can be discussed under, Mats, yes, I mean, you have a strong professional background in signaling. So with regard to ERTMS, maybe also building on the Swedish experiences, now developing the Ostlänken and high-speed and other high-speed projects, what is your view on the CapEx-OPEX dilemma?
Of course, in Sweden we have built ERTMS up in northern Sweden. We finished the Botnia line in 2010. That was a greenfield line, and also we finished the Haparanda line in 2013. Today you see the cost savings, especially for infrastructure manager, both in operational cost and especially in reliability and availability of the trains. And the cost is the fault tolerance is a fourth, in terms of less failures compared to the existing system, ATC system in Sweden. And the operational cost is half of the cost compared to the existing old systems in Sweden. So how do you drive this? And I was very pleased to hear that you have an innovation strategy, because that's the way forward for railway. We need to be able to introduce new technology going forward. And ERTMS is showing that we are actually getting in that direction.
Anyone else wants to chip in on this? Luke?
Yes, just to say that in France, France is now deploying ERTMS. It was a long way, but now it seems that things are ready to do. On the southeast high-speed line from Paris to Lyon, the previous control command system was so-called TVM, made by Ansaldo 38 years ago. It was in 81. And now SNCF and the French state and the industry is moving toward the ERTMS level 2. The capacity of the line is going to increase, at least, from 13 trains per hour and per direction to 16, which is a pretty important increase of capacity. Second project, a traditional line between Marseille and Nice and on the other coast. The signaling system is more than 50 years old, and now it has been decided to move toward the ERTMS level 2 without lateral signals, which means that we try to have the best of the technology in order to increase, and the first estimates are to say that online it's about 20% additional capacity, and in the nodes, Marseille, Toulon, and Nice, and all the more higher density part, we feel that it's at least 30 and maybe more. Let us do the job, and after that measure the results. So clearly, deploying ERTMS is a first step to modernize the networks. And
Phillipe?
On my side, I would like to remind you that the Commission has adopted, together with the Member State, 1 year ago, ERTMS deployment plan for all Europe with different steps, one in 2023 and another one in 2030. So there are some kind of obligation for the Member State to invest in ERTMS, but we are in a bit of a strange situation. Is today that if you look at the number of kilometers which have deployed ERTMS in the world, there are more ERTMS deployment plans in the world than out of Europe than in Europe. So we still have a lot of to do, but it's absolutely essential to continue if we want to create an interoperable system. And don't forget that in Europe, and you are part of this, we have this issue about the 9 corridors, which are at the heart of the single European railway area, where you need to continue to invest and to be sure that trains will be able to go from one part of Europe to the other part of Europe. So there are still big challenges, and that's why we hope that Rail Baltica will be at the top of them and will be able to have in its strategy this deployment of ERTMS very quickly.
Thanks.
Yes, I would like to just to add that it's very important, the ERTMS implementation. As you know, in Spain we have a very high degree of deployment of this system, and it also brings to the idea of using European standards, harmonization, and also to learn and use from what others did. So back in the 80s, when we started with the first high-speed line in Spain, it's something that we really had to do to implement an industry around the rail sector, was to learn from the expertise from others. And it was the first line that used technology, mixing technologies from the two leaders at that time, from France and Germany, for rolling stock and for telecommunications. So that it's an idea, it's a message that I think it would be important to send about learn from what others did, and ERTMS is an example that something that is there.
Neil, you want to say a few words?
In terms of innovation in rail, we work very closely with our infrastructure owner, Network Rail, and with the operators as well. RIA runs a 2-day conference twice yearly, the Railway Innovation Conference, and it's not about promoting industry per se, it's about working together to offer solutions and to share best practice. It's a very, very popular event, and it helps us understand from the owner or the infrastructure owner's perspective what the challenges are in terms of innovation and how that can be brought into the workforce. I don't think anybody wants to take a brand new product that runs the risk of failure, but obviously at the same time we also want to bring new products that provide savings or efficiency into the sector, but we just run the risk of penalties if this new innovative product fails. So from industry, we've got to be sure that when we provide a solution, it works very well first time, but the owners need that reassurance as well.
Thanks. I think the next question, which for obvious reasons is highly upvoted and reminds us of the famous "It's a man's world" song, which says that man built the train to carry the heavy load. Clearly there is an issue that railways is seen, also as a reflection in this panel, as a very manly industry. So Galacticos, please comment, and especially what can we do to improve that balance?
I can only talk on behalf of what we're doing in the UK, really. We have a fantastic organisation in the UK called Women in Rail. It was created to improve diversity in the UK rail industry through providing network opportunities and support for all women in the sector, through mentoring, through involvement, and industry has embraced this. We are underrepresented, that's true, and we encourage more women, especially new to industry as well. That, combined with another program called Young Rail Professionals, is something that we actively encourage, and we do sorts of innovative receptions. So we have a +1. So a senior official has to bring somebody to the reception under the age of 25. So all these initiatives are helping, but we still have a long way to go. And the RIA, our board has changed in recent months or years, and now we have more of a balanced gender representation on our board as well to reflect this. So the website is womeninrail.org if you want to search it.
Thanks.
Well, admittedly, we need to maybe rethink our terminology, our branding, because we don't have a network called Women in Rail. It's called Women in Mobility. And admittedly, I just don't know the exact web page, but I will deliver that. And whoever's interested in that, honestly, just drop me a mail. We would be happy to answer. And it's not restricted to German nationals. It's really an open network. And we, as a first mover, actually, I guess, without being too pompous, established a young women in mobility platform on the occasion of the Unitrans Fair for the first time last year. And I think it was a very convincing, to some perceptions, dazzling success. And we continued to do so. And as I said, you have my mail address and the VDB mail address. Whoever is interested in that network, just drop us a mail, let us know.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Carlo, and then Phillipe.
Two things. The first one, I was invited last year, and I was the only man in the Women in Transport event was organized in Innotrans. It was an honor to be there, and why I was there is because we organized at Innotrans a prize that was given by Commissioner Boots, that was as a champion in the gender balance in transport and mobility. A prize to women in rail research innovation, so that was recognized to a leading team of Network Rail. Going back to what I said before. And Shift2Rail itself was the first signatory of the Women in Transport Declaration that Commissioner Boots promoted. And we are part of this platform, and also internally we try to promote always, and we have at the moment quite almost perfect gender balance inside our organization, but we are trying to promote also with our members, because if we don't take action, it will never happen. So I think all the sector is quite attentive to this, and maybe for the next year a recommendation is to ensure that also we materialize here.
And as far as I'm concerned, I'm quite lucky because the chairwoman of UNIFE is a lady. It's Mrs. Sabrina Soussan. So she's the CEO of Siemens Mobility. And it's true that having a chair lady, it changes your vision, and you are forced to do something. This is the case to react, and to, when you have meetings, to be sure that there will be a kind of gender balance. It puts pressure on you. But there is another issue where she considers that things are extremely serious. It's about what we call the skills shortage, and the fact that we are lacking of engineers, not only for our sectors, but globally in Europe. And that is also important to do a lot of sensitivity, to try to sensitize the people in the universities, and to find women who like to work in our sector, because it is true that, of course, when you see I think the operators and infrastructure managers, you see much more women than in the industry itself. So I think there's a lot of progress, a margin of maneuver, but the fact that you have a chairwoman puts pressure on you to find some solutions.
And also, as we noted yesterday, the 2019 recipient of the European Railway Award is not only a great leader in our European rail industry, also a valuable member of our community, our corridor coordinator, Catherine Trautmann, which I think is an inspiring leader regardless of our gender here. Okay, let's take the next question. As Rail Baltica is financed by the EU, is there any preference in project for EU suppliers and manufacturers? I can say a few words in the beginning, but please contribute. Clearly, there is no explicit preference or discrimination against anyone. Of course, every bidder has to abide by EU standards, TSI. European procurement legislation, has to be able to deliver according to European quality standards. And of course, as you saw in the big geography map, it is mostly European. But that doesn't mean that the doors are closed for anyone outside of the EU. But what is your reflection about Rail Baltica and maybe other projects? Luke?
We faced with the Parliament and the Council in order to have some limits to external of Europe companies bringing their proposals. I understand that the Council and the Parliament were in accordance to authorize, not to make mandatory, but to authorize to put a limit above or 50%. So as soon as there is Connecting Europe Facilities funds, we feel, obviously, as European companies, that this is fair. You can't, on the one side, cut the prices with unknown support to some industries, and everybody have understood to which country I'm thinking, and at the same time keep the money from the EU. So I feel this is and we have now the tool whose name is IPI, and maybe Phillipe is going to deliver some message about IPI. This is the way we have not to build a European Act by European Act, but something close to keeping the capacity to open the markets to other parts of the world.
The issue is reciprocity. I mean, if you cannot enter into a non-EU market, and the companies which are mainly state-owned enterprise can come in your own market, then you are in an unfair situation, and you have no level playing field. Luc said that you have the possibility through the European regulation to have this, first the meet principle can be used. It's not mandatory, but we hope that public authority will use it. Then you have this Article 85, which says that it's possible when a non-EU company gets a contract and you force them to award 50% of the contract to EU companies. It exists, but it's not mandatory as well. So the issue today, and we were quite happy to see that the Council of Head of State and Head of Government asked the Commission and the Member State to work on a reciprocity instrument and to find a way to have the reciprocity instrument adopted before the end of this year. That's where we are. But what we have to do is to be in a level playing field system, and we also have to check if a state-owned company respect the rules that has to be respected as far as public procurement are concerned. I think that...
Right. Yeah, Ben, please. And Pedro, then.
No, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I couldn't agree more with that. Article 85 is about reciprocity, nothing to do with protectionism. And as German industry, I mean, some of our Mittelstand enterprises earn 80% or maybe 85% in exports. So we are highly interested in open markets and competition, and we're not afraid of competition. It works. But as you said, Phillipe, it's about playing by the same rules. And we are profoundly convinced that state aid law in Europe is absolutely essential for Europe and competition in Europe. But we are also profoundly convinced that it's not a good idea to have some bidders from non-European countries with highly subsidized products entering European markets with these products. It's not about competition. This is about distortion of competition. And that is something we don't like. And I think Europe has to do more to counterbalance that. But by the same token, I think the Rail Baltica project actually is a product that is kind of tailor-made for European companies, because our philosophy, our paradigm, if you like, actually is long-term solutions and life cycle cost optimized solutions, and not just transplanting black box solutions to this or that country in the world. So I'm quite upbeat that this is the right and the correct and best matching for all. And also I would like to point out one issue which is maybe a bit contentious, but is to our minds still broadly underestimated, that is cybersecurity. Because the train sector is evolving into an internet of things. It's no longer about one train going from A to B. It's an internet of things that's highly intertwined, closely intertwined. And so if there are any open gates for infecting this system, that would be to the detriment of the whole system, at least potentially. So I think this is also an issue we need to think about carefully, and also ask ourselves the question, what competencies do we need to have in Europe to cope with a digitized rail system? And I think that these competencies should certainly be in Europe rather than in other areas of the world.
Pedro?
Well, it's just to support the message of my colleagues. Of course, we would love that Rail Baltica project, it would serve in a way to boost European industry once the project is European funded. But we know that rules must be followed, and it's okay. But we are not talking about again the same as my colleagues. We are not talking about protectionism, but about reciprocity. Well, I think we all travel around the world to many different countries, and we observe how difficult it is to access to specific markets, and how, let's say, easy it is for those countries to come to Europe to do business. And this is something I think we all more or less agree, and we have to send this message to all our countries and all our governments once and again.
Right. Neil, of course, given the circumstances, it would be interesting to hear your view for something that may never happen.
I think probably we are the ones that could be affected by that rule if we do leave the European Union. We haven't yet, though, and who knows what's going with that. RIR is non-political, so I have personal views, but I can't tell you what they are, I'm afraid. We in the UK have an open, transparent market, and similar to my European colleagues, I have exactly the same view. We don't want to be in competition with companies that have government subsidies. It's not a level playing field, and around the world, it gets increasingly difficult for our members to bid against these organisations when there is government money behind these organisations. So, you know, if in terms of the answer, yes, I understand Article 85, and I don't know how that will affect us at the moment. Hopefully, it won't.
Thanks. Mats, you want to add on this? Okay. Yeah, before we take one final question from Slido, I wanted to return to the issue that Neil, you raised in your initial remarks on the availability and development of skills. I mean, clearly this is a major issue for a project like this in the 3 Baltic countries that haven't seen a project of such scale. We, of course, have certain estimates as to how many full-time equivalence jobs would be created and thereby required hands and heads during the project delivery phase, but also critically during the future operational phase. So please reflect on the policies and ideas on how we can develop those skills, both in a formalized way and also with particular emphasis on the digital skills that, of course, have been emphasized. Okay. Who wants to start? Phillipe?
What we have discovered recently is that other economic sectors have launched with the support of the EU institutions what they call blueprint skills, and so the aviation, the automotive, the textile industry have already launched, let's say 3 or 4 years ago, those big initiatives about skills. And on our side, the Commission is making a proposal for the rail industry, globally speaking, to be in part of these initiatives. When you bring together universities, research centers, the industry operators, and then you try to find a way to attract skills, it's, from what I understood, it's quite useful, and some sectors, and especially the automotive and the taxi, were quite happy. So let's see if it's one of the ways to improve the situation and to launch this big initiative soon.
I want to add that we have a problem of a number of engineers and technicians and so on in our companies. It's the same within SNCF in France, DB in Germany. I feel this is a problem, but at the same time, this is a fantastic opportunity because the railways are not very much in advance in digital and so on, and we are starting the digital revolution. So this is a fantastic opportunity to call and to try to catch young engineers, technicians, and so on with these skills that our traditional engineers and technicians have not, or maybe not enough, and to make this revolution with these young guys. We are clear. We have clearly seen that when you take a new guy or girl within the company, the discussion is very difficult with an old one which knows everything about the former and the old technologies. So this is also, I feel, an opportunity to catch.
Carlo?
Yeah, well, we have a study going on exactly on this topic to try to understand how the workforce will evolve. It should be almost finished. I was thinking, in fact, why it was not yet published, but I will go back to the office to understand it. There are 2 things. First, there is a colleague of Stratton, and I remember one of the board members of Stratton telling me always, don't forget, we have people on the tracks, welding, working every single day, something like this. And this type of skill, most probably in the future, can be supplemented by new technologies, from robotics to any other things. And second, but it's true also that in many countries, we are talking about, I don't mention the country, but one operator, infrastructure manager, the average age now is 55, average age. So you can calculate in 10 to 15 years, people will gone. So we need to find a way to address this situation in the short term and transfer the knowledge to a new generation. And second, we need to be attractive, like is the automotive or aviation, to attract a complete new generation of digital experts because we are digitalizing the railway. But we need to combine this with the knowledge of the railway. So we are really in a transition point into which I think we are we have been underestimated the importance. And I think what Phillipe said about the blueprint and the activity launched by the Commission is something that it will be important. And I take the opportunity to answer the third question here about, for example, the length of the freight trains in Poland and so on. And so on. Only to connect it with the skills. Well, if you think about what we have demonstrated in Innotrans, the connected trams, the connected vehicle, so having virtual coupling between trains, the problem is solved because you can have the same length, but in different type of virtual coupled trains, addressing the issue of the physical limitation. But to do this, you need to have a different generation of engineers. It will be digital engineers, will be pilots or remotely pilots, people driving the train in a completely different manner. And for this, we need to show that the railway is innovating, is attractive, and is a great opportunity to demonstrate skill and competencies.
Carlo, if I may also ask you to comment on the first question, which is kind of philosophically quite similar to the train length, whether technology can help overcome this issue where if the Baltics adopt English, maybe there's a standardized glossary that emerges, automated translation technologies. Can that be a solution, like a solution for the train length?
In the call 2019, we have a topic that is about, and I need to be careful to say what is written there because I go otherwise to prison. But the topic is to use digital technologies to solve the language problem. In aviation, what's happening? In aviation, you know, they use radio and there are digital messages encoded in the flight management system. They realize that they need to transfer the voice in digital voice. So they are using instruments to translate the voice in a digital message. When you do this, you can translate this digital message in all the languages in the world you want. And the idea that why we have this project is because we think that it's possible to do the same for railway. So maybe we don't need English as such. We need to have something that will address the problem of the communication in different type of languages. And maybe think about a, I don't know, European center where an emergency center where something happened to address the most critical issues. But what is going on in aviation and planes are going 900 kilometers per hour. Sometimes they don't have the time in countries to change the bandwidth because they are out before they're able to change the bandwidth. Is really to digitalize the voice and to use the technologies to address the issue. So maybe, I don't know the outcome of this, but we push this project exactly to see if there is any solution that maybe can help to have not a train passing across border, but a train going from the south of Spain to the north of Sweden with maybe the same driver or a series of drivers based on time, with the idea to exactly to cope also with the what we just the lack of maybe driver in the future or the lack of the system in the future. A bit, and we are not inventing nothing more. Is what has been done, what is happening in the road transport. What is happening in aviation to a certain extent. In Charles de Gaulle Airport, French was still used up to 10 years ago, although English was usually a global language. So I think technology can really help to address these type of solutions, but we need to rethink the operations.
Right. Any further remarks on the skills issue? Yeah, please, Neil.
There's 2 points, really. We have an aging workforce in the UK. And we have an organisation called the National Skills Academy for Railways that is going into schools, is trying to promote the sector to the school leavers and to those with degrees. But it's quite challenging. We're working against the likes of the aerospace sector, public perceptions as well. But industry does have, the rail sector does have a steady pipeline, but one of the issues is you mentioned digital, but it's not just digital, it's electrification, it's enhancements, and we also need to rely on our governments, I think, to provide a strong, steady pipeline of work, because it's no good training people, training apprenticeships in, if we take electrification, for example, and you have a period of work, and then those electrification projects stop, and then 3 years down the line, suddenly they're back on, and we will have lost that workforce. That skilled workforce would have gone somewhere else. So we do need, as an industry, control periods that actually, in my view, promote a steady flow of work over a prolonged period of time.
Also to points, firstly, the empirical data, I don't want to sweep anything under the carpet. Certainly, skilled workforce is a major issue in Germany as well, both for blue collar and for white collar skills. So this is a very tough challenge for us. And secondly, what to do about that? We have various initiatives, as I'm sure you also all have, which are also of pivotal importance, no doubt about that. But honestly, I believe that projects like Rail Baltica per se deliver the answer, because we do need to deliver things young, high potential can be enthusiastic about, and they can contribute to something. And if they contribute to Rail Baltica, for instance, they contribute to climate protection, to bringing people together, to digitization, to creating welfare, and to making a difference in the world. And I think this can and should be our narrative to also convince young high potentials to basically shift to rail.
So on the backdrop of this red scary sign, any final remarks on this subject or any other? I think we've covered a lot of interesting ground.
My final remark will be to say to you, the Rail Baltica team, you have a fantastic opportunity to take a lead as a European group of state and railways, which will show that they can do something that the former member states took a lot of time to do. So I would like to say, please, for you and for us, take your chance and succeed.
Thank you. Pedro?
Well, as final remarks, I would say three things. First, or suggestions, don't cut investments from the wrong place, and I'm thinking always about consultancy and engineering. I think it's good to see how some Spanish companies are already working with you, so it's good news for us. But I think also another remark would be to learn from what others did, take advantage of what others did, and I think you have a very high qualified potential partners for your projects, not only, of course, Spanish companies, but companies from France, from the UK, from Germany, from Sweden, from many countries. And the third, it would be to take advantage of the funding that you have from the European Union. You have a real good opportunity to implement a great project in the Baltic Republics, and you can lose this great opportunity that you have.
Thanks.
Just one sentence, I will not repeat what has been said, but you have the fantastic opportunity with this Greenfield project to make something extremely successful and really a flagship for Europe, for the rail sector, I would say.
And Carlo?
I would remark as a marketing remark. As I said, we have a call that is open up to the 19th of June or 18th of June, where we need to check the deadline. Please participate, because it's also an opportunity to connect with the Rail Baltica projects. And we would welcome extremely also a proposal from this region, because it's one of the regions where we have the list of proposals. So if you are interested, it's available. There are different topics like language, like freight aspects, and so on and so on. So please apply, and I think also you can contact the association here to have any help in case of need. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to the audience. Thank you.